and two-way. One way meaning that is downside of the risk, which is seen as pure risk or operational risk. Definition in two ways, which is upside of the risk, which you identify as speculative risk or strategic risk. Further with that, when we are considering forms and categories, we identified that both strategic and speculative risk mean uninsurable risk, while pure risk and operational risk mean insurable risk. We equally discuss ALAP attitude to risk management. I mentioned that ALAP is an acronym which means as low as reasonably possible, or in other literature, as low as reasonably practicable. We discuss sources of risk, the meaning of those risks, and probably their impact. And impact can mean the feel. The impact can mean the responses of the risk on the entity. And those risks to their suggestions. That is, when we say market risk, does market risk mean? What is the meaning of business risk? What is the meaning of business probability risk, reputational risk, derivatives, and so on, and cyber security? And we see the consequences on the impact on the entity. I think we rounded up with risk analysis. We talk about evaluation of behavioral characteristics of risk and how it affects businesses. That's where we identified that we have 4 categories of risk. Meaning that it can be accepted, it can be transferred, it can be avoided, and it can be reduced. That was the concept of TARA or RATA, as the case may be. Now today we want to check what are the role of a board. We mentioned at the time that who are responsible for risk management. Principally, those charged with responsibility, those are the management. Those are where the big board landed. What are the responsibility of the board in risk analysis? Because it's risk analysis we completed last. Well, risk analysis we completed last time. Now board now at the top structure in the organogram are very crucial to the risk management. Because of many things, they are the one at strategic level. So they determine what is the risk attitude. They determine what is the risk capacity. So as a result of that, that's one will result into what they call residual risk. Risk capacity minus risk appetite equals residual risk. When we discuss this residual risk, who can remind us of what residual risk means? Can anybody remind us?
So I think your network is breaking.
Anybody remind us what residual risk means? After all the control measures have been put across to risk exposure, risk actually means after all efforts, all procedures, all controls have been exercised. Hello? My own? The almighty Airtel.
Yes, I think your network, sir.
So, what was the last thing you hear me saying?
Residual risk.
Uh,
Residual risk.
what was the last thing you heard me saying?
Residual risk, sir.
Hello?
It's a risk. The risk that remains after all necessary procedures have been considered.
Okay, let me change to the other one then. Then we'll glue.
Okay.
Oh.
Hello, sir. Okay, I think.
Hello?
Okay, yes.
It's better now, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So what was the last thing you heard me saying so that I won't just be jumping? Sir?
You mentioned that residual risk.
Okay,
Residual
good.
risk.
I was asking, everybody remember what they call residual risk.
That the risk that remains after all necessary procedures have been considered in an organization. So the type of risk that remains is what we refer to as residual risk, according to what you just told us.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Within that, the board they have the capacity to determine what is the risk capacity. Meaning that they determine the level of risk which entity is prepared to accept in order to meet its strategic objective. That one refers to as risk capacity. Because entity cannot run without taking risk. Another function of their own is to communicate risk management strategy to the rest of the entity. We are going to mention things like this under risk control. Because whatever strategy established must be communicated to everybody in the entity. They are also and equally important. Then the board too have to review risk. You need to identify the type of risk, as even in changing of risk. Because risk, when you identify them, monitoring include that they can change positions, just like as typical as you can have it anywhere. In the late 80s, people travel with their cash from Abuja to Onitsha to Lagos to go and purchase raw materials or their wares or goods. Armed robber will waylay them on the road at night to the extent that the big cars, Bokopolo, they look for soldiers to guide them on the way. Okay. The highway robber determined that they need to get bigger gun too. Then When the issue of the trade becoming too much, businessmen carry check. When they get to Onitsha or Lagos, they withdraw in the bank, they go and buy. The risk to change face, arm robber left road, they go into the market. They are coming out from the bank or even from anywhere, as far as you carry bag or a leather black, if it is bread, they will collect it. Then another solution came. We are going to the level of transfer. You bought what you want to buy, you transfer money, they give you your goods. They left market for them, so they go enter bush. When they kidnap the businessman, they are going to carry the cash to go and meet them in the bush. The same threat on cash and financial resources, but they change faces. They change faces. So management should be able to actually guide them in line to monitor the risk that they actually identify whenever they change faces. Now, they determine the risk appetite too, as they determine the risk capacity, which give us residual risk. Give us residual risk. That at that level, then what are those things that entity needed, or the entity need to control risk? What are those things you need to control risk? What are those ways? Risk can be controlled, but what it refers to as specific targets, where you go to involve risk manager or risk management committee. We have risk reduction, meaning that it is impossible for entities to avoid risk generally and totally. And that's why we talk about ALAP should be reduced to a level that is the lowest, as low as reasonably possible. So now we're going to talk under deduction. While we talk about awareness is one of them, embedding risk is one of them, whether in the system or the culture, and diversification. Then the last one is avoiding risk or retaining risk. Risk avoidance or risk retention. In those are smaller forms. Now, in risk targeting, meaning that risks are identified and there must be a specific way to control or hedge them, especially financial risk. As mentioned the other time, one of the basic ways to control it or reduce it is to hedge the risk. And for us at this level, we will understand what they call derivatives. They use them to hedge financial risk, like swap, options, future contracts, and so on and so forth. So those are the areas we can use to do that. So at that level, there must be a risk manager and risk management committee. Risk manager and risk management committee. Because this management committee will be in charge to broker between the risk manager and the board. But the primary role of the board, the risk committee, is to oversee that the risk manager is performing his function. And risk committee is one of the major committee of the board. This time we have not gone into corporate governance. Under corporate governance, we have four major committee. We have four major committee under corporate governance. We have audit committee. We have risk management committee. We have remuneration committee, and we have nomination committee. So those four committees were in charge. So the one that's actually required in risk management is risk management committee, which will be in support and supervise the work of a risk manager. And the policy to be implemented will come from the board through risk management committee, who is a subcommittee of the board, established by the board and reports to the board. So all the reports will go to the board. Now, in case in some entity where there are no risk management committee. Audit committee take charge of risk management committee. And some of us are aware of what we refer to as audit committee. Can anybody remember what they call risk audit committee? Okay, audit committee too is a subcommittee of the board which is made from the non-executive directors, maximum of 5 of them. They want to take care of the major non-executive roles in any entity, especially public interest entities. So if there's no risk management committee, audit committee come to pay. Generally, for the risk management committee, they have 3 major roles or 3 major objectives to serve. Raising risk awareness within the entity, ensuring that there are reporting and monitoring procedures in place and they are effective. They have to keep risk profile up to date by reporting to the board and recommend risk attitude. Recommend risk attitude. Another thing on risk targeting is audit. We are going to discuss risk audits not too long, probably before we end today's class. Risk audit, which is different entirely from what we know as external audit. It's entirely different from external audit. So risk audit give independent review for the risk and the controls that are put in place, because we will see it with a different view other than what we've been seeing from the management level. However, in part of developed nations, especially in USA, it is enacted in an act that they must carry out risk audit as part of their rule-based approach to risk management or risk audit. So it is expressed or expressly mentioned in Sarbanes-Oxley Act. They used to call it SOX. Another way to control risk is about risk reduction. Risk reduction. Now, risk reduction have sub-layers. So one of them is awareness. One of the way to reduce risk is risk awareness. And awareness means that let us know. You mentioned in the first class of risk management that a problem known is half solved. And I just mentioned shortly this idea about risk procedures, risk information, risk management structure should be communicated to everybody in the entity, irrespective of their level. Now I said, for risk awareness risk reduction to be effective, it must be communicated to everybody at strategic level, tactical level, and operation level in a way that they will understand. Because lack of awareness means that there's nobody to know where it's going to strike. And we know that the impact is always very big. The impact is always very big. So if they are aware of what's going to happen, they can set necessary machinery to mitigate the effect of that particular risk. In layman's environment, somebody wants to slap your face. If you know you can guide it with your hand, meaning that it will slap your hand instead of slapping your face, the impact will not be as high as when they actually slap your face. Now, in some circumstances, when some part of the enterprises or the company or the entity are seen as not important, it can make a failure to the process of risk management. That's why awareness is to be at every level. I used to mention that a particular hospital in some years back, big hospital for that matter, advanced system, where there's a common adverse effect every day. At least one person must die in a particular hour. One person must die in a particular life. 7 a.m., 6:30, 7:30. Somebody must die in that hospital. They started losing clients or patients. We say, hey, that hospital, they are doing money rituals. They are ritualists. They are using man's life And the basic problem is about risk awareness. They consider the cleaners in that environment and what do they know about intensive care units? What do they need to know about all this? Are they medical doctors? Are they nurses? That's what caused the problem. The hospital use vacuum cleaner, electric for that matter. When the woman gets to intensive care unit, he will unplug one of the life savers for the patient. He will plug her own vacuum cleaner, continue cleaning. When he finish, he move it back. He plug the life savers machine. Before you know it, the man they unplug it, or the woman they unplug the life savers will have give up. So awareness is very, very important at all the levels, So the risk can be monitored in those percentages. It can likely be because of the environment we are to. You mentioned something when we are doing pestle about the technology, about competition, and some other one like that. Now, another thing about risk reduction is that embedding risk in the system, meaning that risk control, risk awareness, risk measurement should not be things of once in a while. It should be integral part of the system of the entity. Commonly in our environment is fire drill. I don't know any organization that carry fire drill every month. I don't know, and I don't know. I've never seen. Sometimes once in 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes annually they will call fire brigade to come and demonstrate. What happens if fire strike to somebody they just employ after the last awareness? It will be a catastrophe. Like 2008, I was in the United Nations building in Central at that time. There was something like fire alarm. Everybody was running. Our direction is to go to the elevator. Somebody was just pushing, what to before you go in the staircase, not knowing that the best thing to do when there is fire is to avoid elevators, to go through the staircase. We are not aware. If truly that thing was fire alarm, some people will be in trouble. So that's why I said this, you actually embedded it in the system. It must be part and parcel of that particular entity. Vis-a-vis their performance review. Vis-a-vis everyday information. So meaning that there must, at a particular point in time, that entity must be aware, employee must be aware, the manager must be aware about the risk facing the entity. In some circumstances, you label it at the wall. As you enter your office, you need the likely thing you should do, likely thing you should not do. No typical filling station you see, they will not, or gas station, no smoking. Switch off your engine. Mean that everybody that enters should know what to do. It's part of building it in the system. The next thing to make reduce the level of risk or the impact is to embed it in the culture. Because embedded in the system, or you want everybody to be aware. Knowing things is not tantamount to doing the things. Knowing what is good or what is right is not the same thing as doing what is good or what is right. As a result of that, it must be part of the culture of the entity. Culture means that it must be part of their control system. Everybody must see it as lifestyle, normal life of that particular entity. Everybody, the personnel, the management, they see it as a normal life of the entity. As a result of that, everybody will be at large to see that this is part of their function you should do in an entity. Another thing we can do to reduce risk is to diversify. As we mentioned something little about this when we are doing BCG. Diversify means that we need to spread the activities, the products, the branches, the warehouse of that particular entity, not to be in the same place. In case the poor performance in one area of trade will be covered by another one, the portfolio management. And if it is disaster, does that affect a particular area, it will not be up to a particular area. So that is the purpose of diversification. That disadvantage will not come the same time on all of them. In a particular year, I saw in one of the tall buildings in Abuja, I saw some containers at the back. What is this for? It says our backups. Backups. You put backup at the bed. The bed will be just the same compound, oh, but the office is at about ninth floor. You put it at the ground floor at the back. You see that if anything happen to this building, this one is safe. So there must be different geographical land where you're going to actually put them. That is about diversification. And we mentioned them that diversification can be in the trade too, the product where we sell or the service that we give. To cover that, different session, different fashion, different weather, seasons ahead. Different session or different season will not affect the same group of product at all the time. Then the last aspect of this to control risk is to avoid the choice to avoid risk or to retain risk. We should not forget avoidance and acceptance. Acceptance is the same thing as retention. Avoidance is the same thing as rejection. So when you say risk avoidance, it is the entity strategy that means avoid the risk completely. Don't go there. Retention means we change to live with the risk, or we choose to live with the risk. So as mentioned, this particular decision now is a choice, or what refers to as risk appetite of the entity, which will be chosen by the management at their level. By the management at their level. So when you say you avoid risk or you retain risk, is it by capacity of the entity? That is, big entity take risk, small entity avoid risk. It can be yes, it can be no. Okay. So it can be yes and it can be no. In some circumstances, especially when you need to do with high investment, capitalized investment, small entity will not want to take that risk. The big entity who's already diversified can take the risk. If it eventually crystallized, the impact will not be too much on the entity. But small entity just borrow money from bank to develop the capacity. To develop the capacity, will not want to venture into that. Reversely, if it's a risk that's going to affect reputation, bigger entity will not want to take the risk. They want to avoid the risk because they have a name to protect. But for smaller company, they are not afraid of anything because the name is not even known before. And if you take that risk and it succeeded, it becomes known. That is why in each of the circumstances, it's not that entity can avoid risk completely. In some of them, you avoid, in some of them, you take. If entity is small and the risk is not about money, about resources, about just name, there's no name you want to spoil now. There goes circumstance of one boy say the mother is not giving school enough money to school. It will spoil the name. The boy just tell him now, spoil which name? Have you ever heard about my name on radio or television before? So how do you want to spoil it? So, but a known name, you don't want to get spoiled. That's why both of them can be accepting risk, both of them can be going away from risk. So depending on what type of risk that entity can take. That is why the level of risk capacity or risk appetite, they are very, very different. And they are conditional. It does not matter whether you are big or you are poor, you are small or you are wealthy, or the type of product I'm serving is well known, the product I'm selling is not known. It does not matter. The check is that, is it capital intensive? Does it need to do with our image? So that is what we need to get to know. We probably are going to get to know some of these terms one by one as we go ahead. Now, why do entities take risk? We mentioned that it's because of the upside of the risk, positive aspect. It can give an entity competitive advantage. It can give an entity competitive advantage. Closer to us, The only private refinery we have, I mean the biggest in Africa for now, is Dangote, and the only one in Nigeria. I learned that more than 20 companies were given that license at the same time, meaning that Dangote plus others. Because they are afraid to venture into the risk, possibility of acceptance or the rest of the issue like that. Only Dangote can take that bigger risk. And now, what will have propelled to be getting in the next 10 years, started reading them today. Because in his projection that was made public, he said for the first 4 years, it's not expecting profit. Analysis shows that the pump price of petroleum through that refinery should be around 400 and something naira at the beginning for this year. The lowest we have in Nigeria, as far as in Abuja, I'm not talking about Lagos now anyway, is 800 plus. So meaning that what he expects to be earning in the next 5 years, already earning them this year. That's commercial because there's no other private refinery except it. So that's a competitive advantage where you could actually take risk. So entities that are not eager to take risk, they don't want to accept risk, they will lose the competitive advantage. That's why we to say in our regular times or in our home environment language, they will say the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. The bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. I know some of you actually do MMM too. MMM will say at the end of 1 month, they will give you ×2 of your investment. Are they selling human parts? Because the risk is bigger. Some people venture into it, they make their money. After 4 second investment, they pull out. The people that are sitting on the fence, they venture into it and the thing crashed. It crashed. So those are the areas that it's important to study. There's a need always to venture into risk, but then must actually analyze and see where it's sweet for them to take risk and where not to take risk. All this risk, there's something we call risk exposure. Risk exposure. Risk exposure means that an entity will have the higher possibility to suffer loss if there are changes in the event or we have unfavorable changes environment, which can be natural or can be social. It can be hazard, it can be weather, it can be fashion, it can be taste, it can be government policy. It's not what refers to as risk exposure, which entity need to measure at all time. Now, one of the basic way to measure risk is by using what they call risk dynamism scale, because naturally risk is dynamic. It changes. In the scale, we have static, we have them. Those are the two extreme points of the risk measurement. But the truth is that there is no that extreme practically in anywhere in the world. That a risk is not changing, it's static. There's nothing like that. Then the risk too is very volatile, changing every time. There's not like that. So in some times it changes. The more the thing changes, the more they move toward what it refers to as turbulence. The more it changes, the more it moves toward what it refers to as turbulence. So each organization can need to check about what and what they need to check when they are managing risk. And to evaluate risk or to prioritize risk, there's another simple way to use is what we call risk dashboard. Maybe many of us are familiar with this. If not, at least we need to see traffic lights on the road, on our street, that show the level of risk or level of danger exposed to when we violate those rules. Fortunately or unfortunately, the one we have in Nigeria, commonly around, they are just 3. The risk dashboard under strategic analysis are 4. The middle one are combined in the Nigerian system. In some part of the world, they still have the regular 4. Like we saw something like that in Lagos sometimes back. Okay, that one showed before we have our short break now. On the risk dashboard, we have red at the top followed by amber, followed by green amber, and followed by green. So red shows the high risk level. That's the level of risk. While low risk, the green shows the green color show the low level of the risk. Believe that from this we can read the company's risk capacity, the company's risk appetite, and the company's residual risk. It does not mean anyways that when there is red, for instance, the traffic light, you cannot pass. You can still pass and pass freely. But when the go wrong, it's going to be very fatal. It's going to be very fatal. Not only fatal, but somebody died. You don't have option than to accept you are guilty. Than to accept that. That's why somebody said that if it's only him driving at night, does not even see sign of car. When it's red, it's going to stay or the red move up. And the red amber means that you are closer to danger. Green amber means that you are closer to low risk. So that is the another way we can actually assess our risk. So the company's appetite for a particular risk might be low. That is green, and it might be high. That is red. So when it is green, meaning that there is wider capacity for risk appetite by the analysis. When it is red, meaning that there is high level of risk in that circumstances, entities will roll off from that. Okay, by this, let us pause about 15 minutes before we come back to continue from where we stop with
Yes, sir.
other analysis.
Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you so much, sir. Sir, I think sir, you are here to send the notes of today's class.
I think we have sent after the class.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. So we'll be going on break for 15 minutes. Then we'll be back at this is okay by 7:05. Thank you.
The transport allowance is high.
Hello, sir. Mr. Ibrahim.
Okay,
Okay, we can hear you now.
thank you. So as we round up with the controlling the other time, I've made mention some explanation concerning some figures in risk management. So we want to check about risk audit now. We mentioned the other time that in some nations, risk audit was as important as to have enacted it in the law. Sabanasi Act. That part of the world, there's no specific law that capacity like that of BSA. But Financial Reporting Council, Security and Joint Commission of other nations, they put edge in the way to monitor audit because auditing take important role in stabilizing financial environment. So without audit, everybody can be doing what he without checking. Nobody do the serious work. Now, why do we need to audit as part of the risk monitoring? This process now and the procedure for identifying risk, they must be seen to be effective. So effectiveness of that process is part of what they need to involve in audit. Now, for every system, there's what we call internal control. So audit will review the internal control put in place by the management to manage risk so that they will see that those internal control are effective and efficient. Now, another thing why every audit risk is to see that the procedure they put in place can it be juxtaposed with the level of risk, the level of exposure to risk. So they won't have too high of residual risk. Because you say you are put in control. You are put in place control to monitor or to reduce risk or to hedge risk. After the end of the period, when the risk actually crystallized, it become a heavy burden on the entity. So auditor will check whether the process and procedures we have is consistent with the risk exposure of the entity. These are the directors risk appetite and risk capacity. Then they will check the process whether they are weak or they are strong. Because if that one is not done, all material put in place can be a waste of resources in all the time. So what is a very important hand to monitor risk as far as that is possible. Then how do we carry out risk audit? How do we perform risk audit? Now, risk auditor can be carried out by external auditor or by internal auditor. The way it's carried out by external auditor, we are not supposed to see it as external audit for financials or financial statements. The advantage of taking it by external auditor means that it's good to have a separate outlook on the audit. Now, the internal auditor too can carry out risk monitor or risk audit. He has his own advantage too, because as internal auditor is already familiar with the company, the system, and the employee that actually have in place in charge of every aspect of the organization's procedures, including the risk manager, which is seen as the expert in the field of risk management. Now, because in all audits, the first area that auditor was concerned with is whether you understand the environment itself. As far as risk is concerned, what are the technical things that arise that expose the entity to risk more? Is it technology? Is it law? Is it operation? Is it ethical know-how? Is it government? And rest of them like that. Now, so meaning that internal auditor might have an advantage to risk audit than for the external audit if you consider the familiarity with system. Now, the audit is likely to be written in the language of the companies you want to understand. That's generally for audit anyway. Even the language that is resident or the popular in the residence of that particular company. Like in Nigeria, for auditor report to be clear, it must be written in English because English is the official language of the. Some few meters to Nigeria, in Niger, they must be in France or French because they are Francophone countries. Go to Dubai, it will be in Arabic. So just meaning that the part of the auditor will be in language that they actually understand. So that is about language. The other aspect of the review, the internal auditor see is closer than the external auditor, meaning that there are greater advantages in using internal auditor. However, we discussed something before this level as threats to independence and objectivity. There is no audit. They are going to stand the test of the day without objectivity and independence, which might be a great problem for internal auditor. One of those threats is what refers to as familiarity threats. Familiarity threats. So they are really going to actually affect the system of the audit. Just for by matter of reminder, familiarity threats is threats of sympathy caused by close relationship with the audit team and the audit, or we call it auditee, the audit client. Does nobody want to put a report that's going to affect his friends, quote and unquote, badly at all point in time? So that's one of the major hindrances for using internal auditor to assess you. However, other than that one, will be a greater advantage because you already familiar yourself, already know the environment more than somebody that's coming from outside. So that is that about that. Now, the stages involved in risk audit is close to what some of the things we discussed under the process itself, and close to what they call regular activities in audit. Regular activities in audit. Now, we said we identify 4 stages in risk audit. 4 stages in risk audit. And stage 1 is identification. We continue to be mentioning that a problem known is absorbed. A problem known is absorbed. Now, if a risk is identified, the auditor can actually establish the knowable characteristics or feature of that risk. You should not forget we mentioned about the measure the other time through a measure way that starts from static and go to dynamic. The more the environment is turbulent, the more dynamic the risk is going to be. Meaning that it's part of the nature of the risk to change. Then the first thing to do is to identify and monitor the changes too. So if the environment is more volatile, the rate of changes will increase. If it's less volatile, the rate of changes will be smaller. Just like we have witnessed many changes in the telecommunication environment, just like in the last 2 decades that actually came to Nigeria. Unlike agri industry, it's not as volatile based on technology like telecommunication. So you need to actually weigh that one. The same thing with our process, in the process of risk management, is assessment. In risk assessment. Now, when risks have been identified, the next thing is to weigh it. Now, how often can this risk escalate? How often can it crystallize? If it crystallizes, what is the impact? What is the weight like the expected loss? So when you said the expected loss with the probability, I just mentioned in the last class of risk analysis, how often can it happen? How badly can it affect? That is about what we refer to as probability of its occurrence and its consequence of its occurrence. So I thought we will check that one. The next one, which is the stage 3, is the review. The stage 3 here is the review. Meaning that all you need to check the control put in place, the process put in place by the management to manage the risk in case it happens. In case the bad thing expected actually happen, the exposure to risk was neutralized. What are the things put in place to hedge the risk in case of that thing actually happen? So auditor needs to check all those ones if they are likely in place. For instance, there's something we refer to as disaster recovery. What are disaster recovery that this entity happened, especially where the entity is very exposed to risk of fire or cyber attack? What and what do you put in place? You need to check all this. Now, after this one has been checked, the last aspect for all job of audit is report. All job of audit report. So when the auditor actually finish, you need to write a report to the management or to the board of directors, depending on who assigned him. If it is like internal audits that carry out the audit, that carry the assignments, the manual will be the first layer to get the report from. As we mentioned, in very clear language that everybody can understand. So in case this one happened to be one of your questions, you should know there is no more than 4 stages for risk audit. In some nation, it is backed by laws, typical laws, Sarbanes Act, which comes after the collapse, the collapse of Enron. Excuse me. Then there you have identification, assessment, review, and report. Review. So that is that on about risk auditing. I don't know whether I can actually check ERM today. We still have some time left for us. You can check area. Okay. In Tara, in controlling is one of the things we have not take as a measure or discuss as one of the best measure is risk hedging risk. Notwithstanding, I mean we are going to come across this very well in our FR or CBR, SBR now because of our involvement in derivatives and money market, even SFM. So the hedging risk is used more often than not in the financial markets, especially with currency risk. And more often than not, derivatives are always used to maintain the level. I think we should not forget about that. Discussed in the last class. That won't be going around it again. So I'm saying now, there is ISO 31000 about risk management, which have some importance with what we call ERM. We have enterprise risk management that we call ERM. Before we go finally into nationality of excuse me, please. Nationality of the ISO 31000. Now, when you say ERM, means enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management It's not just a language, meaning that entity established a process or procedure that comprise all the network of risk management for that particular entity. Meaning that if the entity have more than 20 branches, or is a group that have many subsidiaries, they are going to be using the same set of framework. They call it consistent framework for all the company branches or the group. That is basically what ERM is all about. So it's targeting that event or any action that can result into failure by the company that will affect it to achieve its strategic objective and affect the value expected by stakeholders. All the stakeholders, have we mentioned them the first, I think it's first model that we discussed. So it should be actually put in one bag. Meaning that as it affects A, it will affect B. Now, for this, there are basically 3 stages to be taken care of in enterprise risk management framework. The first one is to establish approach. Approaching that what are the outlook of the management, which can refer to as the vision of the management. If that one is established, how are you going to achieve it? That one led to the second stage, that is committing resources. What are the infrastructures put in place to make sure that we achieve ERM, enterprise risk management? One of the resources include financials. It includes technology. It include skills, that is know-how for managing risk, which involve risk manager as an expert in that field. Does the entity have this on ground, or the entity needs to go and hire or train the existing staff? If that one is achieved, then you can go to the third level, which is the last level in the framework. That is implementing a system. I mentioned that when systems are implemented, it's subjected to monitoring and re-evaluation. Evaluation to show that does it match what you put it for, or it does not match. Does it match what you put it for, or it does not match? So if it match, entity can continue to progress on them. If it's not match, entity should actually make sure that they start from the beginning. From which beginning? Stage 1, identify the vision. What are we want to control? What is the objective of this entity? How is it going to be affected? How are we going to control the effect? Second one, set out resources. Do we have what it takes to use enterprise risk management? Do we have the financial resources? Do we have the technology resources? Do we have personnel that can handle this? Do we have enough experts in the risk environment? Do we have procedure that is enough that can take care of this environment, so on and so forth? If that one is achieved with the first stage, which is implementation. Implementation means that we have identified the problem. We have checked its occurrences. How frequent are they going to be? Which is probability. What are the likely impacts they can actually give to the entity when it actually happens like that? So that is what refers to as the implementation aspect of it. I think with this, we can go into the last aspect, which is the law, the standard on risk management, ISO 31000, is the commonest standard, either in practice or in classes, exam, usually referred to. ISO means that a standard setting body. What I want to say is that it does not actually follow the line of abbreviation. When we say ISO, we have seen to see International Standard Organizations, where the name is International Organization for Standardization. International Organization for Standardization. So what they issue is international standard for organizations. But the name is International Organization for Standardization. We used to actually issue standards on how to manage risk facing entity, facing a particular sector of the economy or a particular industry. So in whatever in other circumstances. Now, in 2009, they issued a standard we call ISO 31000 that can be used by any organizations and can be applied to any type of risk as far as entity is concerned. This one is established so that Nigerian bottling industry will have the same approach like Ghana bottling industry. Nigeria stock exchange market will have the same approach like London stock exchange market. Just as we have LIBOR, we have NIBOR too. LIBOR, we have NIBOR too. London interbank offer rate, we have Nigeria interbank offer rate too. Just understand. So with this, International Organization for Standardization issue that ISO, which I'm going to mention some of the framework subsequently. In the year that followed, that's 2010, the Institute of Risk Management too, in collaboration with our neighbor in risk management, which is the insurance, Association of Insurance and Risk Managers, they raised another guidance based on ISO 31000, which will have the framework as follows. That one too have what we call 7R and 4Ts. In some literature, 7R and 4T are not separated. We are going to separate it here in our material so that we will be mixing them up in line with our study risk. Now, the first one of the framework is the risk architecture. Risk architecture means that it establishes what are the role and responsibility of each responsible officer. One, we mentioned about risk manager. We have mentioned about risk committee or audit committee. We mentioned about risk management committee and so on and so forth. We mentioned now about risk audit, either by the external auditor or internal auditor. What are the roles and functions of each? That one is contained in the risk architecture. The next one is risk strategy. The risk strategy of the organization should be specified, including risk appetite. We mentioned what we call risk appetite the other time. The amount of the risk the entity can take and they can manage successively. That is an offshot of risk capacity. In the offshot of the risk capacity. So that is the risk strategy, to know what is the plan to hedge any risk if you are actually taking risk. As I mentioned at the time now, risk cannot be left alone. Organization must take risk as far as you want to remain in business. Now the next one is about the rules and procedures for implementing risk. And that's what we refer to as risk protocol. What are the rules and procedures to implement risk? That is that. Then we mentioned about 7 T's, and 7R and 4 T's. Now, the 7R, they are so R. Number one, recognition, which is likened to what we refer to as identification of risk. First R, recognition of risk, same thing as identification. Second one, ranking of risk, that we call evaluation or analysis of risk. Just discussed in last class on the video. Next one is responding to significant risk. If you check our process of risk management, with this thing we call 7R, they are likened to each other. The problem, the difference is that this one is called R. And because we want it to be global, that's why they make it to be in form of standard like that for everybody to use it. So if somebody use identification, evaluation, report, and the rest of them like that, Somebody else will use, oh, my own is evaluation, my own is recognition, my own is response. No. So we want it to be uniform. So the first R is recognition, which is same thing as identification. The second R is ranking, which is same thing as prioritization or evaluation or analysis. The third one is responding to significant risk, what has been identified for that particular entity, special for it. After identification, the next one is risk treatment. Risk treatment is managing risk, controlling risk, and hedging risk. The next one is about cost and benefits. That's why it's another R anyway. It's called resources control. Resources control. Where do you fetch your resources from? If you allow the risk, how much things will lose from us? Are we using external insurance company? Are we using our special set insurance company? Are we setting some money apart? We don't say any insurance company, and so on and so forth. The next one is about our recovery system, disaster recovery approach, which we call reaction planning. If things happen, how are you going to actually react to it? It's about disaster recovery. If it's actually occur, what are you going to do? For instance, now you have a set of procedures in place to take care of risk. Unfortunately, the risk appetite is lesser than the risk capacity, meaning that there are going to be residual risk. If there is residual risk, what are you going to do? That's the reaction planning. And the last one is the next one is the reporting and monitoring. Reporting and monitoring. And we mentioned in the process too, what the one we did last class is about the review. Meaning that after the implementation, what next? Does it meet or it does not meet? That is about 7R. The 4 T's is one of the 7R that was divided for a year. The 4 T's is one of the 7R. R number 4 thereabout. They call risk treatment. Risk treatment. So risk treatment is the one that crystallized into 4. First one, tolerate. Second one, treat. Third one, transfer. The last one, terminate. So tolerate, treat, transfer, and terminate. This one is in the same form with what we got under our risk analysis. We call TARA. Avoid, accept, reduce, or reject. Tolerate means that accept the exposure to risk. Take it as your cross. The next T, which is treat, is take measures to reduce the risk. That is reduction. If you cannot eliminate income. The third T is the same thing we have, transfer. Under our 2x2 matrix for risk analysis, transfer we call it. And we mentioned that that is the only area where risk management have connection with insurance. That is transfer the risk to someone else, either for insurance or any other means. We sell land before the time, at cheap time. And the last one is terminate. Terminate what? The source of the risk. Just to mention only the source and the impact of risk. What caused this risk? Eliminate it. Risk of bad debt. What caused it? Credit sale. Just prove no credit sale. I used to see many shops. No credit today, come tomorrow. No credit today, come tomorrow. Then I'm able to even put them into that trouble. He said, no credit, please don't ask. No credit, please don't ask. So these are the 4 things we have under ISO 31,000. It's just a general framework for everybody to use. In case you have more than one branch or you are a member of a group, so that you won't have different scenario procedures to manage the same type of thing that happen in this entity or organizations. I think with this we can pause on risk, and next class we can go to either ethics or corporate governance. If you have questions on risk or on the models that we treated before, you can ask in the next 10 minutes thereabout. If there are no questions, I think the coordinator can take over from here. So the coordinator. Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Okay. I hope I'm not off. Coordinator
No,
has
no,
put
no,
me
no,
off. Okay.
no, no.
So if there is
Sir.
a question, let's ask. If there's no question, that we prepare for either corporate governance or ethics aspect of financial management. The next study. Ethics is not going to be too much anyway. So if there's no question, you can take over from there, Ben.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for the lecture. So please, if you have question, kindly unmute your mic and ask your question. So if you don't have questions, so we can go then. If you don't have question, please. Okay. So I think there's no questions, sir. So
Okay.
thank you so much for everyone for joining, and see you in our next class, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.